Yeah, we're live. Hello, guys. Welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. This is a place where we question everything, we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain that which is most factual and logically consistent. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Adam B. Coleman, and he's an author. He's the author of the book From Black Victim to Black Victor. He's also the founder of the Wrong Speak Publishing, and he grew up in Detroit, or he was born in Detroit, and he grew up in various American cities. And he talks about masculinity, he talks about fatherlessness, homelessness, and some other social issues. He's very active on Twitter. I follow him on Twitter, and he has very interesting takes on things, both politically, socially, and otherwise. And he's also a former cute boy or a former cute baby, according to your Twitter bio, former cute baby, and and the president of the country Aintblackistan. That one is very interesting for me. So, Adam, do you want to tell us what exactly that country about? What is Aintblackistan? What is it about?
It started off as a joke. My friend Jeff Charles, he did a tweet saying that his Ancestry.com results came back, and he put up a picture of Joe Biden saying, "You ain't black," right? So I just, as a reply, said, my results said I'm from Aintblackistan. And it's just a play on what Joe Biden was saying, that if you don't, if you don't vote for him, then you ain't black. That's to essentially say what he's saying. But basically, taking it as, if we don't support him, then our blackness is questioned. That's how I see it.
Wow.
So the Aintblackistan thing was just kind of like an inside joke between myself and like a circle of followers that we would throw it out there. But then I was kind of like, let's like roll with it a little bit and try to turn it into something. So I have Aintblackistan passports. So if you want a passport to Aintblackistan, I'll send you one. We have an official flag for Aintblackistan. So, but basically, the concept is basically for anyone who is ever challenged or questioned about if they're black because of something that they're doing or their behavior or something like that, for choosing to just be themselves. Aintblackistan is kind of like an asylum for them, like a refuge for them. So I think also for someone like myself, I haven't really like said this out loud, but I've thought this. Like, I've had my blackness challenged since I was a kid. When you move around a lot, you're around a bunch of different demographics, when people expect certain things from you, and this is not just from like black people, but sometimes white people would say certain things to indicate that I'm not authentic, or they expected something different because of the way I look. So after a while, it doesn't bother me anymore. Like, it doesn't bother me for someone to say that I'm trying to be something, I'm trying to be white, I'm trying to be this, I'm trying to be that. I've always maintained I'm just trying to be myself. Like, I stopped caring a long time ago whether people measure my blackness to be authentic or not. I know who I am, and if you're that person, I really don't care what you think about me anyways. So your opinion means nothing. So that's why, like, the shaming that sometimes happens on Twitter, for one, I don't really engage with those people, but if it comes in my direction, I just laugh it off and just block them, if anything.
Wow, that's a very fascinating response to people trying to tell you that you're not black enough, or for having certain opinions, or Joe Biden saying that if you don't vote for him, then you ain't black. So I've got to ask, how much does it matter to you that you're black? Is being black, is it central to your identity, or is it just a fact of nature that you happen to be black?
I don't know. It's one of those things where I kind of see like on my day-to-day existence, does me being Black affect how I live my life or how I do things or how I'm treated? No. I feel like I'm being treated fairly by everybody I encounter. You know, just outside of Twitter, which seems to be this own place, just my day-to-day life. You know, when I'm working a job, how people talk to me, because you can tell when people are treating you different, or you know, even if they're like well-intentioned, but they're tiptoeing around stuff. You know, there's some people who feel like they have to be extra sensitive, you know, in these racial sensitive times. But like
Mm.
no one's like that around me. Hasn't been like that in quite a while. So you know, me thinking about being Black, I think about it because I write about it or I'm critiquing stuff, but that's basically it. My regular life, I don't really think about it. So how important is it? I don't know. It's not the top thing. I'll put it like that. You know, there are other things that are more central to my identity. Me being a father, for one, me being a Christian is up there as well. Being a husband, you know, those identity pieces are more important to me, um, amongst other things. Um, so, I mean, I'm not saying it's zero or anything like that. I mean, it's my identity. It's how people see me. It's something I accept. You know, it's whatever. But I just don't. I don't let it be something. I don't let it be something that I let people use against me or try to manipulate me to see myself in a particular way because they think I should. Um, I always hear people say, it doesn't matter how you see yourself. Other people see you as Black. That's the first thing that they see, and they're going to treat you accordingly. I'm like, I really don't care. Like, if someone's going to treat me negative accordingly, that's their problem. That's not my problem, right?
Exactly.
As long so as long as someone doesn't like hurt me or anything like that, it's not my problem if someone doesn't like me because of the way I look. So why am I going to harness this sort of energy and prepare for the negativity to come? Like, I really don't. I really don't. I really don't see things that way. Um, but you know, is being Black important for me? Yes. Yeah. Somewhat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, and I think some from your answer, I think this will tie somewhat to maybe some of the points you made in your book, from Black
Mm-hmm.
victim to Black victor. And unfortunately, I haven't read the book. I will definitely read it at some point. Steve has, and if he was here, would have had more pointed questions to you. So I just wanted to ask, what is that book about? Can you just give us a summary of from Black victim to Black victor? Because from what I've seen, from what you're saying, you don't see yourself as a victim at all. You see yourself as a victor. So was there ever a point where you felt you were a victim for being Black, and now you've transitioned from that victimhood to being a victor?
Yes. So the Black victim, the Black victor, is talking about the concept of being a Black victim, and also talking about me personally, where there were moments of my life where I wasn't excelling because I was blaming other people, um, because I had depression. You know, it was basically my fault for a lot of different things, and I had like a victim mentality about certain scenarios in my life. And it wasn't until um, I realized that that wasn't benefiting me, and I want to say kind of accidentally overcame it. You know, when you start going on certain paths in your life, you start making certain changes, you see things that work, and then you start realizing like how I was seeing the world before didn't really make any sense. The pathway that I'm heading on now is a much better way of moving forward. Um, so yeah, to kind of answer your question, the book is about um, it's obviously about race, but it's actually deeper than that. It's about relationships. It's about family. Um, so I kind of I use Black Americans kind of like as a point of reference, but a lot of the different things I'm talking about happen to every demographic throughout the United States and even in other countries as well. So when I talk about broken families, I know tons of people from a bunch of different demographics who grew up in similar situations as mine or worse. And that is something to be concerned with. And that affects all different types of things when it comes to childhood behavior, childhood psychology, childhood development, all these different things. Like, it doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your country of origin is. These same principles affect children as they grow up because they're human beings. So I talk a lot about my childhood growing up. Basically, my father wasn't really in my life. I knew who my father was. I would see him very seldomly. And so I talk about it in an open way as far as what it felt like to be that child, what it felt like to be a kid who would play baseball and everybody else's father is around except for mine. And my mom can only come every so often because she has to work long hours. You know, growing up and not knowing what a man is or how I'm supposed to be a man, and then having a son at the age of 21, and now I have to show him how to be a man. So all these different things that it affected me. And then when I understand and look out in the world, if we're talking specifically about demographics, we're talking about Black Americans, the family situation is a huge issue here, as far as single parent homes. So if we were to look at that demographic, that's something to be concerned with. And so why is that something to be concerned with? Well, let me tell you my story. And if I went through that, I know there are lots of other young men and even young women who feel a particular way. I actually describe what happens for young women when they don't have that male figure within the home as well. Also, so people understand, I'm very much so into childhood behavior and psychology just in general. So I kind of break things down in an easy way to understand psychologically. Thankfully, I've had psychologists actually read my book and they said that I'm on point. So I feel good about that. But I kind of break down as to what happens to children when they don't have that male figure within their life, what can happen. And so I just want to use my story. And there's a lot of storytelling within the book to describe what it's like, so people understand. But later on in the book, I give some solutions as to how to move forward. But I also kind of talk about these particular problems that we're always talking about for Black Americans is actually an American problem. The United States has the highest single parenthood rate in the world. And so this is something to be concerned with. And how does that affect children overall? How does that affect our country? And, you know, and I think that, there's a lot of different things I could talk about in the book, but I think the overall point is I wanted to use my personal story as a reason why we should not be advocating for this. We should not be saying, well, she can do what she wants and she doesn't need a man and all these other independent woman narratives. But in the long run, how does that affect her children? Right. And just because your kids survive doesn't mean they're being raised the best. Right. And I almost feel like single parenthood is a failing strategy because you can't be in two places at once. Right. There's a reason why societies went with the monogamous two-parent nuclear family scenario. It's because it works most of the time. Obviously, there are situations there's abuse and things like that. I'm not talking about that. The majority of people do not grow in abusive homes and experience these type of negative outlooks. So what I'm talking about is what is the best possible home life situation for children? It is two parents within the home, right? Two people who can help financially, potentially. Two people who can swap as far as raising and being there. I'll tell you this. I remember far more often that my mother wasn't home than her being home. I remember when my mom was home, she was tired. Why? Because she had to work long hours or she had to work 2 jobs, right? And my sister had to raise me. And my sister resented me for a bit because she had to lose her childhood because she was the older, bigger sister and having to raise her younger brother. It's unfair for everybody. It's not, I don't see anything empowering about making my mother work 60 hours a week. I don't see anything beneficial for having my sister be my caretaker. And this is the type of thing that we don't really talk about. We don't talk about in a way that makes sense to people. We always talk about it from one perspective, from the, I want to say selfish perspective, that I can do whatever I want. It's my decision. I can just live my life. And as if no one else is affected by it. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to be critical of myself throughout the book, which I am. I wanted to be critical of my mother, which is controversial to do. And I wanted to be critical of my father. So I'm critical of everybody. I'm fair in the book, and my tone is it's a pretty fair tone for the people who've actually read it.
Wow, that seems like it's going to be a very interesting book to read. From the few points that you've just given right now, it's going to be a fantastic book, especially about the parts where you're critical of everyone, so everybody gets their fair shake. It isn't you preaching, it isn't you moralizing and say your father was wrong, your mother was wrong. You're saying everybody contributed to this situation, whatever it is, for good or for bad. Everybody contributed to it. So, guys, please let's check out Adam's book, From Black Victim to Black Victor. You can find it. It's on Amazon. So I put the link in the description of this video. And when we're done with the video, I'm going to put the link in the comment section so that we can get that book as well. It is a fantastic book. At least from what Steve told me, it is a fantastic book. And this ties me to the topic that I want to talk with you about today, which is the dilemma of the modern man. We will still need fathers in the home. You have sort of given a background to this topic itself with your own personal story, with your personal, with your life, and which you captured in your book, From Black Victim to Black Victim. So, first of all, let us start with, what is a man? I mean, Matt Walsh popularized this, the question, what is a woman? And that seems to be a very tough one. For many people in the West nowadays, people can't define what a woman is. But more often than not, we leave out an equally important question. What is a man? You said something about your father not being there and you having a son and trying to teach him how to be a man, right? So what exactly are you trying to teach him to become? What is a man?
It's funny that you asked that, because I've been thinking about a lot of different article ideas, and I actually wanted to write an article called "What is a Man?" I'll probably do that sometime in the future, but being a man, obviously, like, there's a whole bunch of different ways that people see manhood and so on and so forth. I think that sometimes when people talk about manhood, it's from a very rigid, chauvinistic viewpoint. It's very superficial, right? Big, strong, protector, right? But I think manhood is far deeper than that. When they say protector, what are you protecting? Well, if you're a father, part of being a man is protecting your family, protecting your children. So with all this stuff, gender ideology and victimhood being preached, I see what happens in the environment when there isn't a man to be like, hold up, wait a minute, we need to cut this out, right? There needs to be more protectors of children and protectors of their family and their wives, who they're supposed to be invested into. That is supposed to be the family that he's supposed to protect. He's supposed to be selfless in that protection as well. I believe that there has to be a controlling of emotions as well. You cannot be I give the example of, if we're driving a car and we get a flat tire, Does it do us any good if I'm screaming and panicking and my wife is screaming and panicking? No. Like, I got to control my emotions and calm everybody down and say, I'm going to get this resolved. That's my emotions and my emotional state, because whether people like hearing this or not, and it's not chauvinistic to say, women tend to be more emotional than men are. So it doesn't mean no good if I act just as emotional as she is, if I, act with histrionics or anything like that. So men need to also have control over their emotions. They need to have to be resolute. They need to have all these different characteristics that's far deeper than going to the gym, lifting some weights, and being big and strong. They need to have these things to foster an environment for their family, for their children, so they can pass that legacy on to the children, hopefully, if they have children. So what is a man? I'll tell you this, because we could go on forever about what is a man, but I'll tell you, a man is far more than the economic earner. And that is actually one of my pet peeves when I hear people talk about fathers and families, is that they've reduced the father figure to being just this guy who pays money, right? So I was just talking to someone the other day about the whole Nick Cannon thing, him having a ton of kids with a bunch of women. And everybody is like, well, he rich, as if that's it. As if fatherhood is just reduced to, well, if you got enough money to financially support him. But that's not the point of being a father. And actually, that's not even the point. People say you're supposed to procreate and be married and all this other stuff, be fruitful with your children, right? And have plenty of children. But the point isn't to have plenty of children with multiple women. That's not what the essence of what it was talking about. It's talking about build a big family with one wife and one family and one household, because being a father is more than being the financial earner, being the guy who just throws money at a situation. I'll tell you this. There's been plenty of times where economically I was struggling and my son didn't even care. My son didn't know that I was struggling. My son didn't know I was struggling until I told him, or he read my book. He understood what I was going through. My son didn't know. All I knew is that his father was there, right? That's all he cared. He got to see his father. He got to hang out, and every so often he got to go this place. Children need a relationship with their parents. They don't need money thrown at their kids. They don't need a ton of toys. They don't need to pay off their children. And I think we've had this really unhealthy view of fatherhood being reduced down to how much money you got, how affordable are children, what can that man do? And because what ends up happening is, if the mother can make enough money to afford the children, then why does she need a man? Because that validates that argument. Because if he's nothing but a check earner, well, she doesn't need to put up with a man, so I don't need him. And the kids don't have to have a father. Guess what? I'm the mother and the father, right? You have all these different things that kind of breed into it, because we've made the father into being a one trait human being, but we would never say that about mothers. So
Exactly.
I think that's the imbalance that I'm trying to highlight and talk about.
Wow. That's quite a definition of what a man is. Now, there's one aspect that I was expecting you to touch on, which you didn't touch on in this definition that you gave of what a man is. So, is it related to anything biological, or is it just functional, or is it just a role? Is it
Oh,
performative?
so obviously there's biological. I was going beyond the obvious of biological. Because often when we talk about manhood, we're talking about traits and behaviors and things like that. So obviously, there's a biological component to it. I think it's very self-evident. I think the only reason we even talk about it is because of the alphabet mafia. they like to have this conversation because they're trying to wedge themselves in to a particular conversation that isn't necessarily about them, and it's not discriminatory towards them either. We're talking about something very particular as far as manhood goes. So this is not a conversation about them or anything like that. This is something separate. So that's why I didn't touch on the biological. I like to talk about the behavioral, the mindset, and things like that.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I know that, and most normal sane people know that. But in the current climate, at times it becomes necessary to even point it out, to be that obvious, because we saw the case of that Supreme Court nominee who was asked, "What is a woman?" Which she could have given the sort of answer that you gave, or she could have given whatever answer she wanted to give, but she said she wasn't a biologist, which means that she was tying womanhood to something biological. Now, if she's tying it to something biological, you should even make it much more simpler for her to define. You don't need a biology degree to do that. It's even much more difficult to define a woman when you have to talk about traits and characteristics and other things that are associated with womanhood. If it's plain biology, we know that there's a dichotomy between the sexes. So she could very well just say an adult female human being, an adult male human being, but she didn't say that. She said you needed a biologist to define what a woman is. So that's why I wanted to see whether you tell me that we also need a biologist to define what a man is. But obviously, we don't need it in this case.
But you know what's funny about that situation? See, this is part of the silliness about this whole thing, is that in order to placate someone in particular, you have to suspend all belief and play stupid, right? She's a judge, right? She's highly educated, and I'm assuming that her IQ is high enough to be of someone who you can respect intellectually. She knows exactly what we're talking about. She knows exactly what a woman is, because you put her on the right topic, she'll say woman just like that, right? So, or she'll say, I'm a woman. I'm sure she said, you could probably go back and find some clip of her saying, I'm a woman. So she knows clearly that she's a woman, right? So that's what I'm saying. This whole conversation, thankfully, is by very few people who are just silly, right? They're silly people, and they're not to be taken seriously. And this is no disrespect to anybody who has some sort of gender dysphoria or anything like that, but it was never about insulting them in the first place, right? But now we have to play this game of, it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember, like when Clinton was being impeached and he was playing games with Ken Starr, and he said, well, what is the definition of is? Right? Like, just like, stop what you're doing. Like, you know what we're saying here. Like, and that's why I feel like we're playing. We're like, well, what exactly is a woman? It's like, exactly what we're talking about. For centuries, everybody knew what we were talking about. Now you want to play stupid. Well, what exactly is a woman? Who gets to define what a woman is anyways? What is this actually a table? What is a computer anyways? Aren't we all computers? You have to play this this idiotic game. And I've seen some of the smartest people play the dumbest game ever of wordplay, to suspend all belief because it sounds progressive to them. And that's when you say, I can't take this person seriously. I just can't. If I'm sure she probably has a pet at home, like a lot of people. Does she know she has a boy or a girl pet? Like, how would she know? Her pet never identified what exactly it is. Like, are we going to play this? It's a semantic, stupid game done by silly people. So, yeah, that's my rant. Sorry.
So do you think these people, they really believe this thing, or they're just acting? Or do you think there's anyone who actually believes these wild things?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think it just really depends who it is. As far as like Jackson, she's hard to tell as far as if she really believes it. But see here, this is part of the problem with when it comes to progressivism, is that in order to be a progressive, you have to actively be hypocritical all the time, right? So that's what's hilarious to me are the feminists. When the feminists clash with the tea people, and because their ideology is actually the same, but the ideology is hypocritical for both of them. And so they're constantly clashing between the two. And I think it's hysterical. So I'm just watching on the sidelines as they're going at each other, as they're trying to both follow this faulty logic of how the world is, that's constantly progressing, and what actually is feminism. You know, men can be pregnant too, like just this whole fantasy world. And I'm just laughing because no one who is serious believes this. So that's why, like, I kind of feel like this whole neo-Marxist woke movement, we should criticize it as often as possible. We should criticize it as intellectually as possible, because it's intellectually faulty. It falls apart easily. And you can see where it falls apart when the same people who believe in the same stuff conflict with each other, because it doesn't make any sense, right? It continually falls apart. So I think we should criticize it, but part of me also says, and thankfully, I think this is going to go down as some sort of trend. So kind of like how we look back and say, like in the I think in England, or maybe even in the United States, they would go to the barber and they would cut them to bleed them to get whatever sickness they had out. And then we would go back like, wow, they actually believed if they bled them that they would heal them. But yeah, we used to believe that. I think we're going to be much like that. We're going to go back and be like, wow, the Supreme Court justice said, I don't know, I'm not a biologist.
but you know, there's a difference between those two. The first one was, okay, the one where they had to bleed people to bleed out the illness. It was due to genuine ignorance. We've known for all of human history what a woman is. Are we devolving? Are we devolving such that we don't, all of a sudden, we don't know what a woman is? People will parrot something like the gender pay gap. Men are earning more than women. How do you come to that conclusion if you cannot even define what a woman is? How do you, I mean, good Lord, you're fighting for women's rights, yet you don't know what a woman is. So what exactly are you fighting for? It doesn't make any sense.
That's the funniest. So the Twitter account for the Women's March, I think it's the Women's March. That Twitter account is the funniest Twitter account to me because they're constantly advocating for men. And so then the feminists are like, what are you guys talking about? So they constantly go back. I just think it's hysterical. But yeah, you're right. You're actually more correct in that analogy. That was due to ignorance, what they believed at the time. But we know the answer. Some people are just playing stupid. And I don't know if Jackson is playing stupid per se, or she really believes that. Part of me says she's playing stupid.
She is. She's obviously playing stupid. She is, for political reasons.
Yeah, for political reasons, yeah. I would say and the more I think about it, I think she's playing stupid. Because I'm sure we could find some clip of her saying women this, women that, women need to stick together, women this.
But one of the criteria for choosing her in the first place is that she's a woman. Joe Biden himself said that he's going to appoint the first woman or the first female African American to the Supreme seat of the Supreme Court. So she met that criteria. That's why she's there. So all of a sudden she doesn't know that was part of her criteria. And to me, I think even critiquing things like this, I even don't think it's necessary. I think the most necessary approach is ridicule. Just ridicule the shit out of them. And that's why, of all the people, I really don't follow the Daily Wire people that much, but there's one person I do really follow, which is Mouthwash, because he ridicules these things. He just makes fun of them. He doesn't give them any serious thoughts. He just trolls them, and I like him for that, because these things they're not even worth giving any intellectual consideration, because they are so obviously stupid or insane, in my opinion, that we can't tell what exactly a woman is. Most of these so-called gender and what those are just personality variants, and you have made it into a sexual identity. It wasn't necessary for you to carve out a sexual identity. You can have whatever personalities people are expressing today have always existed from the beginning of time. If you go back far enough, you would see that these things are not new. But nobody termed them to be a certain gender or a certain sexuality. People just say, you know what, this is the way I express myself. But I'm a man, I'm a woman, but this is the way I express myself.
Yeah, and I would agree with you also on the Matt Walsh point. So actually, that leads me into something that, so I think what Matt Walsh does is very important. Like you said, in some ways he's kind of trolling, but in other ways, what he's doing is saying, I don't care about your tactics to come after me. He's financially backed by an organization that fully agrees with him and will back him. So he doesn't have the financial canceling to worry about. They're independent. They do whatever they want. So carte blanche, he can say whatever he wants. He can speak freely and not have to worry about the silly people, right, who want to come after him because he's saying stuff that's obviously true. Now, as far as like the intellectual side, and not to like pat myself in the back, but that's where I kind of come in some respects. My job is more so to keep people from going towards the silliness, right? So when I write an article, I want it to be for the people who are in the middle, right? So when I make arguments, I'm not trying to make a conservative argument. I'm not trying to make a liberal argument. I'm just trying to make an argument that makes sense. Like, does this make sense? And to me, this particular thing, whatever I'm writing about, doesn't make sense to me, right? So, and people who follow me long enough understand that I'm an independent. And so, I got Republicans that I don't like, and I got Democrats that I don't like. I will admit I got far more Democrats that I don't like, but there's definitely Republicans that I don't like. But for me, it's less about politics in that particular way. It's more about ideas. I really believe that right now, what we're facing in this particular culture war and leaks into the politics, we're not having a left versus right battle. We're no longer like 10 years ago. You could say maybe it was a left and right battle. What we're facing right now is what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And there's one particular party, my old party, that is behaving in a way that makes no sense, right? They're accepting the extreme side of the left as being what everybody thinks. And no one thinks that. No rational person is cool with you teaching sexuality to an elementary aged kid. Like no rational person is. Maybe these crazy leftists, want to be progressive and end with the new thing, might be okay with you having drag queens show up and do all this stuff. But most people aren't. And so I cannot understand, as a former Democrat, as to why my party is catering to the extreme nonsense. Like they're just giving them carte blanche socially, and taking on these things. It makes no sense to me. Well, let me rephrase that. It made no sense to me. Today, I think it makes sense to me. I think they're taking on this crazy progressive ideology socially, so to appease the progressives, without taking on the progressive political stance, right? Because if you look politically, they don't really do that much of anything that is that progressive. They make gestures, right?
So it's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off, yeah. They make certain gestures. It's a distraction, right? So we get to sit here and talk about Drag Queen Story Hour and not about why they're doing inside trading at the federal government, right? So it's a perfect trade-off for them on a social level. And the whole thing about progressivism is that it takes minimal effort to do anything. It's all gesture related. Policy-wise, if you put anything progressively policy-wise into motion, it fails and it's horrible because it's all ideological. And it's all with this idea that, well, if we just, like, for example, we have bail reform happening in New York. And it's kind of like, well, if we just let them out, they're only in there because they're poor. No, that's not why. Like, I want to ask people, do you think the mass majority of people who are locked up are innocent? Because if your answer is yes, then that's a different story. But I would doubt that they would tell me that the answer is yes, that the vast majority of people who are locked up in jail are innocent. So if that's the case, why are you doing this? If you want to say you want to have some sort of bail reform where we can take a further look and actually be very particular about how we implement bail, but to get rid of it completely. So you need to tell me I can go and assault someone, get locked up momentarily, get processed, and come back out, and I can reoffend. And because that's actually happened. And like, not writing for the New York Post and seeing and being more focused on the news, like, we got story after story of stuff like this. We had a guy recently who just punched a guy in the face for no reason. He wasn't talking to the guy. He just side hit him in the face. The guy was a convicted sex offender. He had just got out, I think, less than a year ago, and he was on parole. And he just side-cocked the guy. It makes news. He gets arrested. He gets processed. And actually, I'm sorry, it makes news. He turns himself in. Then he gets arrested. He gets processed. They release him. But the man's on parole. It takes for the governor to say, hold up. This guy's on parole. Why is he back on the street? Then he gets rearrested because if he's on parole and he commits a violation, he's supposed to go back to jail. Now he's back in jail. Why? Because it became a news story. That is how inefficient this whole system is. And then on top of that, I wrote about a story for the New York Post where a man defended himself, right? So we have all these crazy people who assault people and hurt other people. This man defended himself from being assaulted with a knife and killed the man. It was self-defense. It's on camera. Gets locked up and murder charges thrown at him. It takes for a judge to reduce it from, I think it was like $1 million at the time, and reduced it to something that was more affordable for him to get out, right? Eventually, because it became front page news, because everybody could watch the video camera footage, right? Then it becomes like, all right, well, let's drop the charges. But imagine if it didn't, right? So that's why, like, this whole, we're dealing with progressive district attorneys within this country. We have, I can't remember his name right now. He's been going all around the country, financing, bankrolling all these progressive district attorneys. He actually wrote an article admitting that's what he's doing, and he's been doing it for decades. And I actually wrote an article rebutting that this is the guy who's screwing us all over. And he's admitting that this is what he's been doing. He's been putting district attorneys who implement bail reform in the state of Illinois. In the state of Illinois, I believe it's next year. It's even worse. You should see the level of violations that you'll get locked up for a moment. Actually, you'll get processed and they'll let you go right away. Right away.
So Is all this related to sort of the crisis in masculinity? You think that there's a crisis of masculinity in the West right now?
Well, crime-wise, yes. Crime-wise, overwhelmingly, it is male, overwhelmingly. Um, and then if you were to break down, like we always talk about guns, for example. I was having a conversation with someone from a different country who's living in Spain, and we got on topic of guns. I said, if you want to know where the gun violence is, look at the cities, right? And then you look at the cities. Some of them have the strictest gun laws. They don't work, right? The people who are breaking the law don't care that the law is there in the first place. They're breaking the law. Like, so what you're actually doing is keeping people who would follow the law from owning guns, and you're making it more difficult for them. In the city of Chicago, you can't purchase a gun, yet it is filled with guns. That is how ridiculous the entire scenario is. They think that by implementing laws that criminals will abide by it, and it doesn't work. But as far as like a crisis of masculinity, it's overwhelmingly male. When you look at the prison population, overwhelmingly men who grew up in broken homes or single parent homes, abusive homes. You have the drug aspect as well, right? And what do you take drugs for? You take drugs to distract from life, to suppress thoughts and feelings. A lot of drug users take drugs because they experience previous trauma, things of that nature. You have gangs. Gangs are the result of young men looking for guidance a lot of times. Sometimes gangs are traditional. We don't talk about that often, where they have cousins, family members who were in this particular gang. They grow up, they're part of that gang, but they all have the same kind of upbringing. No father figure, and the boys are raising other boys. So you have all of these different things that are happening as far as gun crime and crime in general. And it is oftentimes coming from this particular broken family home structure, right? So I like to say people who are happy, healthy, and have a purpose don't want to hurt people, right? Like that's not when you're purpose driven, which is what your father is supposed to help instill in you, right? Like for my son knows what he wants to try and do when he graduates high school in a couple of years. I've helped to foster his purpose, right? And I've helped to keep him on that path. When you don't have that father figure, especially for young men, and I don't think I don't want to say that, but I think some women, I don't want to say all women, but I think some women don't understand how purpose-driven men are. Like we don't mind working because working gives us purpose in some respects. So we want something to do. We want to feel useful in our society. And yeah, sometimes we attach our profession to our personhood, but imagine not having a purpose. Like, why am I here? Being a purposeless man is useless in society, and you have people who feel useless. So you put someone who is looking for purpose and emotionally vulnerable. You look at men who haven't monitored their emotions and all these different things. Highly sensitive men, that you might see show up into prison, things like that. Like, this is a crisis of masculinity for sure. And they're supposed to be getting this guidance from their fathers. And I don't think it's a coincidence that majority of them grow up in an environment where there are no fathers. And one last thing I'll say, anytime I write an article talking about fathers not being in a home, I get message after message from people who used to work in corrections, people who used to work in welfare, especially the people who worked in corrections. I got multiple people who worked in corrections would tell me, all I saw were, especially juvenile, specifically juvenile, all I saw were boys who grew up in abusive homes or boys who did not have a father or both, right? That's all they saw. So these children are the result of a chaotic family structure. And now the rest of society has to pay for it.
Wow, that's quite a lot. In fact, answered many of the questions I wanted to ask you on the relationship between this crisis of masculinity and fatherlessness in the homes. But we're still going to pivot to that. But I wanted to bring you to one aspect of the social discourse, which seems to be dying down right now, but it was there a while ago, which is the idea of toxic masculinity. So what you just described right now, is this what people mean when they talk about toxic masculinity, or do they mean something entirely different?
I think it depends who is saying it. So from the feminist aspect, the feminists don't like traditional male traits, right? They don't like assertiveness, right? Because assertiveness comes off as maybe sometimes abrasive. They don't like, I don't want to say arrogance, but like a healthy amount of ego, right? Because ego can sound like, something negative. For example, like they like to say mansplaining, right? I'm sure you've experienced this. You're talking to a guy, or like, let's say you're in a group conversation, you're talking to each other. Someone will cut you off and tell you something, give you some information, right? We do that all the time, right? So you could be having a one-on-one conversation with someone, and then a third party comes in and cuts you off and tells you the information, the right info, right? If you were the woman in that equation, they would say that guy who cut you off is mansplaining to you, right? He's only doing that because you're a woman. That's part of toxic masculinity. That is we do that with men. Like it's not a I hate women, shut up woman, let me cut you off. Like we do that in general. So from the feminist aspect, that's what they're talking about. They don't like traditional and basically like stereotypical male behavior. They think that, especially when it interacts with a woman, they think that is part of toxic masculinity. If I was to say toxic masculinity, which I wouldn't, actually, let me say this. I think the biggest problem that we have are feminized men. And so when I say feminized men, some people would think I'm talking about like flamboyant, right? I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is men who are highly sensitive, men who in a deeper way behave like a woman. I'll give you like a funny example that maybe you never thought about this. I was having this conversation with someone. All right, picture like a rapper, right? Just some rapper, some famous rapper. What do they like to do? They like to go shopping. They like to wear name brand clothes. They like cars, but not because like of the intricacies of a car. Like I'm a car guy. They like cars because it's flashy, right? Who does that sound like? That sounds like a woman, right? And so when you kind of think about it, like a lot of these rappers maybe come from rough areas, maybe they grew up with a single mother. It's like, hold on, they're mimicking the women around them, right? So we wouldn't have a problem socially if a woman wants to wear nice clothes, right? Because women's appearance is very important to them. We wouldn't have a problem socially if a woman is attracted to being in a nice car, right? Because it's a social status kind of situation. And it also, from her perspective, it shows that this man, let's say she was getting with someone who has a nice car, it shows that he can afford to take care of her, right? So these are all deeper things. But you take all these things that a woman would have, or the way she would see the world, and you transplant it onto a man, it starts to look kind of funny. Why? Like especially the shopping part, like I always find it funny when you see like the rappers on Instagram going on like these $500,000 shopping sprees. And I'm like, I don't know a man who would go on $100 shopping spree. Right? And he's buying clothes and shoes. I'm like, this sounds like a woman. It sounds silly, but that is part of the feminization of men, right? Because you see how they act impulsive, right? And the one of the biggest indicators of success is delayed gratification. Your father's supposed to teach you this, right? So when you want to go and do this, your father says, no, you have to wait your turn. You have to be patient. Your father's supposed to teach you this. They're just buying and spending and buying and spending. Why do you think so many athletes go broke? Why do you think so many rappers go broke when their career ends? Why? And it's because they don't know how to delay gratification whatsoever. And then you look, who raised them? If they're raised in single parent homes, they raised around their moms. And not to say that their moms are bad people, but just to say that they're mimicking their behavior, or they're not getting the reinforcement to prevent certain behavior, right? Men need reinforcement to tell them what not to do, right? So like little boys are chaotic, right? Because they don't know how to control their emotions. In some ways, they could be violent, all these different things. They could be abrasive, and they have to be regulated, right? And an unregulated man is a dangerous man. And so that's why for me, everything starts from the home. Everything starts from how you curate children and how they grow up from there. But if you don't have that other half, women are extremely important. So if we were having an outbreak of, I don't want to say outbreak, but if we were having a scenario where it was nothing but single fathers raising children, we would have a completely different issue. And I would say we need to address this. Where are the mothers? So this isn't about the father being more important or anything like that. This is talking about a balance between the two, right? So that's definitely something that I think people should kind of think about, the crisis of masculinity and how it looks in our society. Even in certain respects, like when we talk about tough guys, you watch their behavior though. They may have big muscles, but you watch the ultra sensitivity. You watch how they don't have emotional regulation, right? They're impulsive. All these different things, they're set up to fail, even if they're successful at one point, right? So that's why I use the rappers and athletes, because they can maximize their youth. And after that, they're no longer needed in a league. They're no longer needed at a record label. They're no longer hip. And guess what happens to them? They go broke. Their life is chaotic.
So basically, they are no longer hot, like the hot chick who has lost her beauty.
That's it.
She becomes irrelevant. Wow. So this parallel, this example that you gave about rappers being flashy and how it's sort of a feminine behavior, it never occurred to me, but it makes so much sense. I mean, one of my friends on Twitter, is also on Facebook too. He said something a while ago. He said that men only buy two things: beer and the shit their women ask them to buy. So, which is true, because women are the drivers of commerce. They're the drivers of consumerism. They're the drivers of buying things. They always want to buy things. Okay, we need this in the house. For the man, he really, if it's up to him, he's just going to live in the house with nothing. I remember when I started living alone, before I got married, I lived for months in my house without furniture. I just had my bed, and I just had. It took my wife now, but my then girlfriend. It took her when she came around to say, like, you don't have curtains around. You don't have this. You need to get some other things. You get so. In that sense, I think that analogy makes perfect sense, where men go on a shopping spree. You're buying so much clothes, you're buying so much jewelry, you're buying so much shoes, you're buying so much, you're trying to show off like a peacock. Those are things that women typically do to impress their friends. And when you see men having such behaviors, it just shows that they have taken on certain feminine traits, and they're just trying to express it in the most masculine way possible that they can. Obviously, exactly. they can't go and buy chocolates and all that, so they just look at the masculine thing, which is cars and male boots and all that. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Wow. So I don't want this conversation to drag on for so long. I just want it to be about an hour. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Adam, and I would plead with you that I want to have as many conversations with you, because there's so much to talk to you about, and I would love to have you back again. But let me just have this final question for you,
Sure.
um, which has to do with Jordan Peterson. I know you love Jordan Peterson so much, and I can tell you how I know you love him, because every comment that I make under any of your tweets always gets a like. And there was one comment I made critical of Jordan Peterson, and there was no like on it. I was like, Adam doesn't like this.
I don't even remember. Are you sure I even saw it?
Yeah, you did see it. So I'm sure you always see all my comments. You always see all my comments, and you respond with a like or something. But that one, it was just blank. Anyhow, I'm not going to be critical of Jordan Peterson right now. So I wanted to ask that: do you think that the rise of Jordan Peterson is symptomatic of of a void where young men are looking for a father figure to, and he just seems to be filling that role right now, and that's why he's become so popular, especially with young men.
Yes, for sure. And I can understand it. Jordan Peterson, amongst you can talk about like the red pill community as well, which there are definitely positives and there are negatives about it, which that's a whole different conversation. But I think Jordan Peterson, especially him being uh, was his psychologist? I forgot.
Yeah. He's like a clinical psychologist.
Clinical psychologist. So he's also talking about it from like a psychology perspective, and from him having clients and seeing what the world looks like through their eyes and talking to them about it. So he understands on a deeper level. It's more than just be a man and pick up your pants and just be strong. It's more than that. It's talking about, like, when he talks about purpose, he understands on a deeper level what it looks like when a man doesn't have a purpose and how he can gain a purpose and why it's important that he has a purpose and what are the steps to get to that particular point. I actually have my son reading Jordan Peterson's book right now, his first book.
Maps of
12
meaning? Is it maps of
Rules of
meaning?
Love. What's that?
Is it maps of meaning he's reading right now?
No, I'm sorry. I think it's his first book or second book. It's the 12 Rules to Life.
Okay, I think it's the second book. I think he
It's the
wrote
second book.
maps of meaning before he wrote 12 books for life.
Okay. Yeah. So I have my son reading that as part of he's now doing homeschooling. So I have him doing that as being part of school. So yeah, he definitely addressed things that I think we're missing, that are of the void when it comes to men. I think he's tapping into something that it's something that I'm trying to tap into as well, and by talking about it in a slightly different way. But men aren't having their voices heard like they should. Um, and maybe from some women's perspective, they'll say, you had your time and so on and so forth. But this isn't about whose voice needs to be heard over who, but it's about, hey, we have issues too. Suicide is a big issue. Feeling purposeless is a big issue. Um, for example, we should be able to talk about fatherless homes without it being some sort of jab at single mothers, right? But at the same time, if we're going to talk about fatherless homes, we have carte blanche to say deadbeat dad, but we don't ask questions about why did my mom pick this dude? Like, why didn't you marry him? Why didn't you find the guy to marry, then have children? And then if it didn't work out, that's a different story. But we have a lot of scenarios where that's the case. That's a scenario for me. I asked my mom like a year or two ago, how come you didn't want to get married? And she said, all I wanted was a boy and a girl. That's literally it. She had no interest in getting married. So my life destiny was based off of her mindset. And so I have questions about that. Why would you think that's the best thing? And it's ultimately how she wanted her life to go. And so we suffered because of her decisions. We went through homelessness. We went through all these different things because of her decisions. She created this path that she wanted, and chose the man who wasn't inevitably going to be there. So we have to have these particular conversations, and we have to be critical, because if we can't be critical, you can't change anything. But to kind of go back to what you're saying as far as Jordan Peterson, yes, men need to be able to express themselves. Men need to be heard as far as what is actually ailing them, what they think is wrong within society, without being called a misogynist or a chauvinist or anything like that, because we have valid concerns. And I think Jordan Peterson is also kind of like the litmus test for someone who is rational and someone who isn't rational. If someone says that Jordan Peterson is hateful, a misogynist, and stuff like that, that tells me they've never listened to Jordan Peterson. They've heard some blurb in Vice magazine or some shit, right? But they've never actually listened to what he had to say. Jordan Peterson is very conscious of what he says. He's a human being. There's been times that he regrets saying certain things in a particular way, but he's under a lot of pressure. He's probed sometimes, and he's constantly asked questions. So I can understand that. But he's sensitive when he needs to be sensitive. And he's very touched by people. The man isn't hateful, so that's kind of, Jordan Peterson is kind of like my litmus test as far as like when I hear like insults about him. Like, if you have valid criticisms about him, that's one thing. Like, I don't like how he says this. I think he's too bombastic about blah, 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 blah. Like, be critical. I don't care about that. But I think it's interesting when people say that he hates people, he's this, he's that. It's like, this man is always talking about how hate is evil and we need to be careful of it. And we need to be careful of power and all these different things. So, yeah, I think I answered your question.
You did. Wow, that has been a fruitful 1 hour, 7 minutes conversation with Adam B. Coleman, a former cute baby, founder of Speak Publishing, author of From Black Victim to Black Victor, and also president of the country Aintblackistan. And I need to apply for a visa to that country because I want to be in that country too. So we can all look at Joe Biden. It's also that you ain't black. I would say, okay, you were referring to us. So Adam, thank you very much for joining us today. This has been a superb episode. Please, guys, Adam's book is on Amazon, and the link is in the description of this video. I'm also going to put it in the comment section. So let's go check out that book. From what he said so far about that book, it's going to be a phenomenal book. So let's try as much as possible to get it. And I also want to plead to Adam that whenever I call on him for us to have a chat like this, he should please indulge us and come so that we can talk. I have a ton of other questions, but I don't want the stream to drag on for so long. So Adam, thank you very much for coming. So any last words on this topic before we end it for today?
No, the only thing I want to say is if people want to follow me, they can definitely follow me on Twitter at wrong_speak. Definitely check out my new Substack. I got that set up now. So adambcoleman.substack.com. And also check out WrongSpeak Substack, wrongspeak.substack.com. I'm going to be, there's going to be some big changes coming from me personally, which is a good thing. So I'm writing a lot. I've been writing for the New York Post basically every week. So I've become a regular, which is unbelievable. If you told me a year ago I'd be writing for them every week, I'd be like, I didn't think I'd be writing for them once. Yeah, I'm just writing. I'm being able to express myself. And I'm just trying to show people that it's possible to do so. So I honestly think I'm just a regular person who decided to one day say something, and I haven't regretted it.
Wow, thank you very much, Adam. So guys, please like, share this stream and make your comments on the stream. And if you're just joining us for the first time, please subscribe to this channel. We always have interesting, engaging conversations like this every week. Times Fridays or times Saturdays, we have these conversations, and I'd like you guys to always come back, and we'll have a great show. So Adam, thank you very much for joining us today. And that would be all for today. And I'll catch you guys in another live stream. So it's bye for now.
Thank you.